So I'm having a chat with Grant of Feeder. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Jim. How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks so much. So we've been playing a single of yours called Lost in the Wilderness. Tell us a little bit about the single, first of all.
Yeah, well, it's the oh god, what is it? The fifth? Is it the fifth single from? Because
Something
you've had
like
a lot
that.
of double A. We sort of we wanted people to obviously the album's not out till after the tour, so and it's a double album, so there's quite a lot of tracks.
Hmm.
We were quite happy to let people hear stuff up front, which is why we've pushed out a lot of singles. But yeah, it's probably one of the more melodic anthemic tracks. You know, there's some heavier stuff on the record. I'm sure you've heard Playing with Fire and ELF. There's obviously other stuff like that on the record as well. But yeah, I mean, it's yeah, it seems to be really connecting with people. It's it's a very simple song, but sometimes those are the ones that connect. And yeah, I mean, it's a love song, really, I suppose, or I suppose it touches on that feeling when when you're kind of not with that certain person. Maybe lockdown was a bit of a test for a lot of people. Not being to see each other. So maybe in the back of my mind, it was inspired partly by that, just that feeling of emptiness you feel sometimes. When it's a loved one or a family member, whoever that person is. Yeah, I mean, it was a song I wrote on acoustic guitar. Uh, Actually, the recording of this was quite tricky. Although it might sound very simple as a listener. Just getting it right for me was it. It took a while actually. Um, Even though it probably sounds like one of the more simple songs on the album, when people hear it, it was just getting it right sonically. I didn't want it to be heavy for the sake of it. I wanted it to be anthemic, but effortless in some way, and just kind of not being too forced. It wasn't that sort of quiet bit heavy, but bit formula. It sort of lifts in the chorus, but just getting it right. Yeah, it was. It was actually harder than I thought to do this track.
Good. Good. And as you mentioned, that is coming off your new double record, Black and Red. What can people expect to hear when they get a chance to listen to both the records?
Yeah. I mean, it's like Black Red. I mean, it's like a double album, but I wanted it to be, to be like two separate albums and two separate CDs, rather than one long player. We could have fitted it all on one CD, but I wanted it to feel like a proper double album and to give you that little break. So so they're very much connected. It is a double album, but I think that they're still sort of standalone albums in their own right, and they're also connected to the previous album, like Torpedo. So this is kind of like the end of the trilogy, I suppose. Some of the songs were actually recorded at the same time. Some of the stuff it was written after, like the single "Lost in the Wilderness," for example. Um, what can people expect? Yeah. Well, it's our first double album, which I think is quite brave for any artist. Um, Hopefully, no filler. Uh, that was always the plan, because that's often what you get with double
Mm.
albums. Uh, it's been a real labour of love, for me. This one, I've really worked hard on it. We've all worked really hard. I think I've written some of my best songs on this record. Uh, yeah, it's like classic Feeder. I think it ticks a lot of boxes. It is what we, it is what we are, and we're not here to try and reinvent the wheel. We're comfortable in our musical skin, but we still like to push ourselves and try new things. There's a lot of stuff gone into production. There's loads of keyboards, string arrangements, lots of different stuff on there. But hopefully, we've still maintained our sound and kept what we are as a band and our DNA. Um, but yeah, there's anthemic tracks, there's strings, there's some riffy stuff, there's some heavier stuff, there's stuff that reminds me of our earlier works, there's stuff that I think it's got little snippets from a lot of the Feeder records, on this. And I didn't, it's not like you planned that. I think it just happened in a very natural way. It's very difficult being in a band, because it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're Foo Fighters or Smashing Pumpkins or Coldplay, whoever, you there's always going to be somebody that says, "Oh, it just sounds like usual Feeder," or "It sounds like that," and then you've got fans like, "Well, I wish it sounded more like what I love about Feeder." So I think what you've got to do as a band and as a writer, for me, you just got to do what feels good to you, and then hope people like it. You've got to make music for yourself, and then put it out there. I just hope they like it. Otherwise, you're making music for the wrong reasons,
Mm.
and I think that's wrong. And I don't want to be that kind of band.
Yeah, absolutely. And over 25 years of releasing music now as Feeder, how have you and how has the music evolved since the start till now?
Mm.
Sorry for bringing it
Well,
up.
that's all right. I mean, I've probably just answered that in some way. But well, actually, it's been over 30 years of Feeder. But it's you know what? I mean, I've learned a lot. I think as a writer, I think some people may disagree, but I actually think I'm writing better songs now than I was when I was younger. Yeah, of course, you touch on magic when you're young. You do things and you go, wow, yeah. And there's a certain energy you have in, just that youth. But as a writer, I think I know what I'm doing a bit more now. I know how to make records better. And we haven't lost that belief and feeling we had when we started. Obviously, we haven't got John, and I do miss him. But fortunately for me, being always being like a writer, that's enabled us just to carry on. And we've worked with some amazing drummers since losing John. He's still there, in our history.
Mm.
But I think we've managed to maintain what we set out to do originally. We wanted to be a band that were diverse, that had a big musical canvas. I didn't want to be stuck just being this heavy riff band all the time. That's not what Feeder's all about. We wanted, we loved bands like The Police and Led Zeppelin, because Led Zeppelin had acoustic folk songs and songs with strings on. They had songs like Kashmir, then they had like rock and roll songs, and I love that. And we've always wanted to be a band that had that freedom, you know. And I think we're still doing that. And I think that we set out to do that from day one. It's probably enabled us to still have fun and still experiment. We're not, we haven't made like a techno album or a or a jazz fusion record, because that's not the kind of band we are. But we do experiment a lot with keyboards and technology and stuff. It's not just guitar, bass, and drums. There is a lot buried in there as well that give those dynamics and keep the interest there. Um, and that's what that's what I love about it. And that's what I love about making music and being in Feeder.
Yeah, I bet. And you probably love the touring side of things as well. You've got a month on the road coming up, but you can't wait to be touring
Yeah.
again.
I do. I find touring like slightly terrifying, because there's always that fear. Sometimes I think, God, I wish I just played guitar, because you don't have the pressure of singing every night. I love singing. I never really planned on being a vocalist in a band. I wanted to be a guitar player and write songs, and singing was part of that process of writing songs. I used to do backing vocals, and then I ended up covering the singer one day in a band going back years ago, and people said, "Hey, you should carry on singing." And I just carried on from there. So singing, I always feel like a guitarist that sings. I don't. People go, "Oh, you're going to sing with Feeder," and I go, "Well, I suppose I am." But uh, playing guitar and singing is kind of a team for me. But I do love touring. It's a challenge. It's terrifying. It's an ultimate high. I I love it. I yeah, it's really hard to explain. Maybe it's just me. You feel the pressure because you want to be to sing well every night, and you have to look after yourself, especially when you're out for a month.
Mm.
That's quite a long tour for the UK. It's usually 2 weeks, but so the sets are a bit longer. The new album's not the easiest album to sing. So some of the songs. I'm not getting any younger, so yeah, it's sounding good, but I've just got to look after myself and get out there and enjoy it now. It's all
Yeah.
about the audience. When they're there with you, it just pulls you right up, and it's the best feeling ever. You can't get that anywhere else. So yeah, to answer your question, I'm looking forward to it. It's it's going to be great, but slightly terrified at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And once the tour's out of the way, it's then festival season, and you've got a busy summer as well.
Yeah, we have. We're not, we don't want to sort of do too many festivals. We got offered a lot actually, but we felt like we didn't want to be like, oh God, Feeder again. But so we're doing about 10 festivals. We felt about right for us. It's obviously, we've got a new record as well, so it feels like we want to do some festivals. I mean, festivals and album and album tours are different, because a festival set is basically your best of set, so it's going to be more catered to that. That's when you get to hear a lot more of the bangers, and obviously the singles from this record that connected. When you do an album tour, it's obviously focusing on new music, but we will be playing some some feeder classics as well on the tour. But yeah, it's a different headspace doing festivals to doing your own shows. It's a whole different thing because you're playing to a lot of new people at festivals that that don't even know the band, even though you've been around for 30 years. There's some young kids still like discover you.
And you've headlined many festivals as well. Some of the big ones back 20 years ago to some of the smaller ones today. Is your sets different for a headline of a festival, different to those when you're slightly further down the list?
No, not really. But I mean, we're headlining most of the festivals we're doing. I mean, some of the bigger ones we're like sort of second, third from the top. So
Yeah.
we got some good slots. We're pretty high up at Isle of Wight Festival on the big top stage. I think Suede headline. I think we're either second or third from the top. So we got some good slots. I mean, like the Manics headlined. We have headlined the big top a few times, but the big top stage at Isle of Wight's got a lot bigger than it used to be. They have bigger acts on there now. So yeah, we're not headlining like Reading and things like that, but we're doing all right. We headline some decent sized festivals, and sometimes I quite like it when we're like second or third from the top. I find that sometimes the perfect time to play because the audience are still not too drunk and they're not too tired. Sometimes the headline slot is great, but sometimes you always feel like the audience can be a bit tired sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I think we approach it the same. I mean, obviously, when you headline, you've got a bit more time, so you can play a few more songs. But apart from that, we keep a similar vibe. Obviously, if we're doing a slightly more rock-based festival, we'll maybe put some of the heavier tunes in there. And if we're doing a slightly more mainstream one, we're maybe gonna try and not scare them away and do some of the more obvious songs. We've got such a catalogue. We can do that, and that's probably why over the years we've managed to play with Queens of the Stone Age and Foo Fighters, but also tour with Coldplay and U2. Because we have that kind of broad section of music that we can make it work with those sort of bands.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to touch a little bit on the writing side as well. So for you guys, how do tracks normally start off?
Usually when I'm sat now in my kitchen on acoustic guitar, that's how I write virtually everything. Sometimes I might go to the studio and write electric, but that's how I write them. I normally demo them, and then the demos often end up being a lot of that ends up being used. Then I'll send tracks to Taka with a guide bass on. He'll listen and he'll have a mess around with bass or whatever. I mean, during lockdown, that was the only way we could work. So, but that's how a lot of people work. I mean, I still love that. When going in the studio and doing it. Hey, here's a song, go in and do it. But I think when you're a new band, that can work if you're very organized and you know what you're going to do. But I think nowadays, records are made, like very differently. With technology being the way it is, we do sometimes go in and do like a basic backing track and then build on it afterwards. But studios are expensive. There isn't so many around anymore. So if you're going to do that old school approach, you have to really be organized. Otherwise, it's a very expensive way to make records now. I think a lot of people are doing just like working different ways. But the songwriting's always been pretty much the same. It usually starts off on guitar, sometimes on a keyboard, but usually guitar. And that's I'm pretty old school, really.
Yeah, fair enough. Grant, it's been a pleasure having a catch up with you.
Thanks, Jim.